This conference will now be recorded.
Hello and welcome to this installment of Planning Across the Spectrum's weekly webinars. Today I'll be talking to you about estate planning. And I want to preface all of this by saying I am not an attorney. None of this should be interpreted as legal advice. I'm strictly coming to you from a perspective as a parent and a special needs advisor of things that I'm familiar with, things that I've done, and I am not aware, nor do I intend to counsel you on your individual circumstances. If you have questions regarding your personal legal situation, I strongly recommend you consult with an estate planning attorney who has a strong focus in special needs planning and or elder law. A lot of the Medicaid planning that needs to be done for families with special needs can also be accomplished by individuals who have a law practice with a strong focus on elder law, because Medicaid planning ties in with the elderly as well. With that disclaimer, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about a will, durable power of attorney, healthcare proxy, et cetera, but I'm not going to be going into a lot of depth about what these are. Again, you're going to want to be talking to an attorney. I want you to be familiar with the terms and at least understand what you can expect when you go to an attorney, because sometimes it can be pretty intimidating. At least for me, it was, not knowing what to expect. You know, when I was active duty military, we did a basic will, but we didn't do much more, if anything, other estate planning. We certainly didn't have a special needs trust set up. And as a result, when my wife died, I was ill prepared. I didn't have a healthcare directive. I didn't have advanced directives for her. Every time I got ready to deploy, we updated my will and we told, she knew what I expected. And you can't have a conversation about what one, or at least I couldn't, about what I wanted without knowing what my wife wanted. So at least we had the conversation. We just didn't formalize it by putting it into on paper. And that's what you need to be thinking about. It's probably not the most exciting or romantic thing, and may not even be what you want to be doing when you're in the middle of a pandemic and you're in a home lockdown because of a virus that's going around with people getting sick and dying. But it's important to have these conversations, with your family. It's make sure they know what you want. Do you want to be on a ventilator? Do you want extreme measures taken? Things of that nature. For your child with a disability, depending on how old they are, what type of life do they want? My son wants to live independently. It's my goal to do what I can to give him the supports necessary to live by himself, rather than he doesn't want roommates. He's made that very clear. So using a residential option isn't something that I'm going to be doing. And then when you are gone, how do you want your child provided for? Or children, if you have children without disabilities, if you have pets, if you have social media accounts. I mean, there's a lot of things people take for granted that when you're gone or when you're incapacitated, it's up to your loved ones to figure out. And oftentimes they're in the midst of dealing with their own grief, and this just adds to the plate. So the more uncomfortable conversations you can have before it becomes critical, the better. And then think about the professionals you're working with. I know when I was a financial advisor, sometimes it felt like they were dodging my call, right? You could tell when they had a lot going on and they were already overwhelmed, so they didn't want to talk about things. Oftentimes it was, it seemed like I was chasing them. And, that's part of the job. It's part of why I left being a financial advisor, but it's also because they may not want to hear what I have to say. Sometimes getting that impartial third person point of view, it can be uncomfortable. It can be not very satisfying because perhaps they don't agree with what you want to do. That doesn't mean you have to follow their advice. It just, it is helpful to get an outside perspective. Oftentimes, when you're in the middle of things, you can lose sight of your blind spots. So, talking to the professional and asking them, okay, if you were me, what else would you have done, can be helpful. Now, I don't think any professional should be beating you up about something that maybe you overlooked or you did incorrectly. What's in the past is in the past. I don't think there's any room for shaming. I think if you're working with somebody like that, I'm not sure how professional they are. The professionals I've worked with, they understand that human beings make mistakes. We all make decisions based on the information we have on hand, and those decisions that we make are the best decisions for the time and the information we have. And there's no point in going back and saying coulda, shoulda, woulda. It's also helpful to make sure your professionals know who else you're working with. It's oftentimes I like to collaborate with the other professionals. I like to, with permission from my clients, I like to make sure that the other professionals know what we're talking about. Very often I get referrals from financial advisors and attorneys for their, they'll be working with somebody and they'll say, hey, Eric, we want you to talk to this person. So I'll talk to their client. And with the client's permission, I'll go back and circle back to the advisor and the attorney. And what I found is very often what happens is the client gets a much more robust plan because there's a much clearer picture of the client's whole situation. So that's just an idea. And the other thing to think about is if you're not working with somebody, maybe ask some of those other professionals who you could be working with. Sometimes the professional may not be a good fit at this time. I know a lot of educational advocates or consultants or attorneys. It doesn't mean I'm connecting them with every client I have. But for the clients that do need that type of help, I would much rather have my client ask me for somebody that I can personally vouch for than go on Google and get somebody who has some degree of skill, but also maybe not. So shifting gears a little bit, I like this document, the 5 wishes. I wish I had it when my wife and I were doing our estate planning. The number one thing there is it's not just for your spouse, it's also for your children, your adult children. And this is with or without disabilities. If you get in a position where you can't speak or you're unconscious or whatever the reason is that you just can't express how you feel, then having somebody that knows what you want and will speak with your voice that you trust is really important. And you should make sure you have that in writing. And you can find these 5 wishes documents online. You can, they have a very robust website where you can create a portal online and upload all the documentation and information for yourself. I would encourage everyone, even if you don't necessarily want to work with an attorney, to at least complete this document. And I have the website on here for you to look into it. Again, I'm biased. I think it's a great tool. And I think everybody should have something similar. If nothing else, at least check out the website and see if it's something that resonates with you. So again, these are the documents you're going to need. A will is nothing more than saying what you want, where you want it to go, who you want it to go to, and this is what's probated. So when you hear the word probate, this is what's happening, is anything that does not have a beneficiary on it. So your life insurance will have a beneficiary. Let me clarify. A beneficiary could be the estate, which means it will go to probate because probate is to decide how your estate is divided and distributed. Or a beneficiary could be a person or a special needs trust. If it's a person or a special needs trust, it's not going to go through probate. It's going to go to whoever's identified. And that goes the same for bank accounts, investments, retirement accounts, all of those should have a beneficiary on it. And you want to make sure you update those at least annually. Oftentimes I found people haven't looked at their beneficiary form since they set the account up. And it's important, that, especially if you've been divorced or married or something, that you verify those. Durable power of attorney, you want the durable power of attorney. I don't know if you can even do a power of attorney anymore, or they're all durable. All the durable means is, should you become mentally incapacitated, the power of attorney remains in place. And power of attorney, it's a pretty powerful document. You're letting somebody act on your behalf, and that could be everything from signing a contract when you buy a house to having full control over all of you and full access to all of your finances and legal decisions. You can make it as restrictive as you want. When I was active duty, I would often have a durable power of attorney in place for the length of the deployment, so it would be 3 to 6 months, because while I was gone, I needed to make sure my bills were paid. And I limited it to paying the bills that I knew about. So they couldn't go out and in my name go get a new credit card or buy a car. They could only pay the electric bill or the phone bill or whatever. And then the trust, there's all kinds of trusts. I'm not going to try to begin to go into the different types of trusts. Further on in this, I will be talking about the trusts that I think apply most to our families, and that's the special needs trust. And all of the special needs trusts are going to be irrevocable trusts. Oftentimes, when you're talking to estate planning attorneys or financial advisors or others, you may hear a revocable trust, and that means you can change it while you're alive. A special needs trust, by design, has to be irrevocable, meaning you can't change it. Letter of intent. These documents are great. Sometimes I think there's not enough realistic expectations about how much you're going to actually put into it. It's a very long document. It can take a very long time to fill out. So what I try to do with mine is periodically I'll go and I'll update it as my son's dietary wants and needs change, or if something significant happens. I can tell you I don't have a completed letter of intent. What I do have is the portions that I think are the most relevant, and the ones that I worry most about. You know, for example, my son likes to do his own give me his own grocery list, because he knows what he wants to eat, and I try to respect his wishes for what he wants to eat, letting him make his own meals. That's important. That's a way of exercising his freedom, and I want to make sure that when I'm gone, whoever comes behind me to care for him knows that that's important for him. You know, if your child has doctors and specialists, it's important that whoever comes behind you knows who those are. And you can find a good letter of intent online. I use the ARC of Frederick County's letter of intent. There are other templates out there. I encourage you to look into it. It really doesn't have to be super complicated. I think the more complicated it is, less likely you're going to do it. It could be just as simple as creating a Word document saying and starting to go along to describe who your child is. I encourage a template because, for me anyway, trying to think of what I should write down, I usually draw a blank. But having a template that gives me things to think about, very, very helpful. Special needs trusts, there's a lot of different types of trusts, as I mentioned. The ones that we care about as parents of children with disabilities are the first party special needs trust, also called self-settled trust, the third party special needs trust, also called supplemental needs trust, and a pooled trust. So first party trust is the individual's money and assets. Anything the individual owns in their name that you're trying to get out of their name goes to a first party trust. That could be a settlement from a car accident. That could be grandma and grandpa left a life insurance policy to little Susie. So now little Susie has $200,000 in her name and is going to lose SSI and Medicaid. So you move that into the special needs trust. It would be first party. Military, the survivor benefit plan would go into the first party trust. Also, some federal employees, their children may qualify for the pension. That would also go into a first party trust. Third party trust is everything else. One more thing about the first party trust, there is a Medicaid payback. That means states have the right to go into the trust and take the funds remaining after the individual dies to pay back the state for any health care that the state has paid for while the individual is alive. So, for example, your daughter is receiving speech therapy every week and it's paid for by Medicaid, and over the lifetime, that speech therapy has been $200,000. When your daughter dies, if there's $300,000 remaining in the account, the state would come and remove $200,000 to pay Medicaid back, and then whoever the subsequent beneficiary is would get the remaining $100,000. If there was $5,000 in the account, the state would get the $5,000 and the remaining $195,000 would be forgiven, because they don't, if there's nothing in the account, they're not going to go after other family. The third party trust is different. The third party trust does not have a Medicaid payback requirement. It's everybody, like I said, it's everybody else's contributions. So if you have grandma and grandpa and they want to leave money to the child, then you would want to have the third party trust name as a beneficiary. Or you could have, when you die, you could put the house into the trust and then have the trust pay the property taxes and the insurance, and then you could have the trust hire a property manager to maintain the property. You could have the trust hire a housekeeper. You know, there's a lot of things you can do with the trust. It's a supplemental needs trust. The only thing you can't do with either of the trusts is you do not want them paying for rent, mortgage, or food. Because if it pays for rent, mortgage, or food, then you could impact SSI benefits. Because SSI is designed to pay for rent, housing, and food. And then a pool trust is run by a nonprofit. And what it does is it takes many small accounts and pools them together. So when the investments are done, instead of investing, let's say, 10 accounts with $100,000, they are investing one account with $1 million. And that gets them better opportunities and lower fees when they do the investing. The accounts are still segregated. The money is not mixed. If you have Mike, Tony, and Sue, each have their own account. It's just the money is invested as a big whole, as one entity to get better negotiated rates, lower rates, and better opportunities. I'm usually recommending pool trusts to families who have $500,000 or less of investable assets. And the reason I'm doing that is it can be difficult to find a advisor who will manage money for $500,000. Now, I know Planning Across the Spectrum, Andrew will tell me he manages accounts with smaller accounts, and so that's certainly an option. But when I'm speaking generally, and I'm speaking across the country, and I try to take into account how many people the average financial advisor can work with, which is about 150, 200 people, and how many families out there need special needs trusts to care for their children, and how many disabled individuals there are out there. There's going to be a lot more individuals with disabilities and lower accounts accounts less than $500,000, then there are advisors who can service them or will be willing to service them. So I really encourage people to consider a pooled special needs trust. In Maryland, we have 3 different options local to us. We have the First Maryland Disability Trust, that's here in Maryland. We have Shared Horizons, which is in DC, and you have the Arc of Northern Virginia's Pooled Trust, which is in Virginia. You do not have to be in the same geographic location to use a pooled trust. You can use pooled trusts from around the country. What you're going to want to look for is how well they communicate with you and what the fees are going to be. Now, I'm not the person to say fees are everything, but they are something you should be aware of. No matter what you do, when you have a special needs trust, you have to pick a trustee. Now, when you have a pooled trust, the trustee is picked for you, and that's part of the interview process. You want to make sure that the pooled trust you're working with, that they're going to communicate with you, and they're going to communicate with you in a way that you want them to communicate with you, that they're going to be responsive enough for your needs. And the same goes for picking any other trustee. Often I encourage people not to use a family member as a trustee. If you want the family involved, I would encourage them to be a co-trustee or a trust protector, somebody that's there to speak up on the disabled individual's behalf. But I would rather see the families use corporate trustees, professional trustees, be it attorneys or otherwise. Banks might be a good trustee. There are professional organizations out there that are trustees. There are trust companies that all they do is manage trusts. And the advantage with using a professional or a corporate trustee is the likelihood that those individuals are going to know the reporting requirements, and you'll have continuity. If you're using a family member, there's concerns that I have that reports may not be made on time. Filing taxes are very different when you file taxes for a trust. Making sure the money is spent properly is really important because you don't want to violate the rules of the trust. I'm less concerned if they're good with money because you can hire that out. Again, I was saying you can hire a financial advisor. So I'm less concerned, does a family member understand how to manage money? I'm more concerned with, do they understand the rules of using the trust? Do they understand what reports are required and when? And are they going to be available for the individual when the individual needs them available? Family members, because this is not their full-time job, right or wrong, will still have other responsibilities. They have their own families, perhaps. They have their own stuff going on. So when the individual with the disability needs something from the trust, my concern with family is, will that family member make themselves available? And I don't want to put this on a way that, oh, well, my son's sister will always be there to care for her brother because she really loves him. I'm not saying that the family member does not love or does not want to do the best for the individual with the disability. What I am saying is, I don't think it's fair to ask the family member to try to decide between the individual with the disability and their own family. So let's say the individual with disability has something come up, and then the family member has a child who also has something come up. Now you're putting that family member in a really bad spot to pick between their child and the individual with disability. Sticking with a corporate trustee or a professional trustee eliminates that. Now, what you lose with a professional trustee and a corporate trustee is that personal touch, which is why I do think it's important to have the family member engaged and have the family member perhaps listed as a co-trustee or a trust protector to be the voice for the individual with disability without all of the additional stress and responsibility. That's my 2 cents. Every family is going to be different. I don't know what's right for your family, but these are things I want you to think about and talk through with your family and understand how you feel today may not be how you feel in 5 years. So I hope this was helpful. As always, we can be reached at planningacrossthespectrum.com. If you have questions about this or any of the other topics, please feel free to reach out. If there's topics that you feel we have not covered or you would like us to cover in more depth, please tell us. And if you have feedback on what we've put out, we're more than happy to receive that as well. It's my plan to bring on professionals. I do want to interview attorneys and professional trustees and the like to get their perspectives. I would like to bring on a representative from a pooled trust, for example, because I think it's important that you hear the different perspectives. I'm speaking as one person, professional and personal, but it's still one point of view. I want to expose you to other professionals and get their voice out there. And as I bring those on board, I will release them.